My name is Owen Lee, Private Signal Corps, winter of 1943. They sent 6 of us to guard a stretch of forest in Oregon, a place so quiet it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Folks later said it was bears, but I know better. I heard it, I saw what it did. 6 of us went up that hill. Not all came back. Our orders were simple: watch the ridge, keep the rail line clear, report anything unusual. It wasn't glamorous work. No medals, no flags, just cold, wet days and nights that lasted forever. We built our camp where the pines leaned close together, halfway between the logging road and the creek below. A few canvas tents, a potbelly stove, and enough bad coffee to keep a man awake through anything except boredom. It rained most days. When it wasn't raining, it was misting, the kind of damp that gets into your bones and never leaves. Our boots never dried. The air smelled like wood smoke, wet wool, and diesel. Sergeant Thomas Hale ran our post. A man carved from old habits and colder mornings. He didn't waste words or smiles. You did your job and you did it again to make sure it was done. He believed routine could hold back the chaos. Maybe it could, for a while. The others made up a strange kind of family. Corporal McKenna from Boston, mouth faster than his brain, grin even faster. Private Donald Reyes, a joker with hands that trembled when the wind came up. Weller, our radio man, quiet and careful, always checking the frequency like he was listening for ghosts. And Sanders, the youngest, barely more than a boy, who still believed bravery was something you could practice. Then there was me, farm kid from east of nowhere. I could mend wire, fix a fence, and read a storm. That was enough to earn a rifle and a cot. For the first few weeks, it was all routine. Wire checks, patrols, cleaning rifles that never fired, nights spent listening to static and rain tapping on canvas, the kind of monotony that makes men talk too much or not at all. But even then, there were moments when the forest felt wrong, like it was waiting for something, watching us from just beyond the fog. I didn't say anything. None of us did. We were soldiers, we had orders. And the ridge had its secrets. That's where it started, the quiet, the cold, and the thing that came with both. This is what happened before the forest took my friends. We were 6 men in a forgotten corner of Oregon, tucked between a ridge and a river that sounded louder than it should. The Army called it a communications post. In truth, it was a handful of tents and a signal shack held together by damp rope, cold coffee, and habit. You learn a lot about a man when the world around you is quiet, when there's nothing but fog, mud, and each other. Sergeant Thomas Hale ran our little post, mid-30s. But the kind of man who seemed older, not from age, but from seeing too much. He had that stillness some men carry, the kind that fills a room without noise. Steady eyes, straight posture, a jaw that never unclenched. He never raised his voice, never wasted breath. If he told you to do something, you did it because you knew he'd already done the math. You could trust his silence more than most men's speeches. Hale didn't set bark orders. He just said, do the job, then do it again. And we did. Corporal McKenna, everyone called him Mac, was his opposite in every way. Boston boy, loud and quick with a grin that made you forget how far from home you were. He joked too much, laughed too easy, and had a temper that came and went like a spark. But when things went bad, he was the first to move. The kind who'd curse at fear until it backed down. He played cards by lantern light and cheated so bad we let him win, just to see him smile. Then there was Private Donald Reyes, a joker too, but not like Mac. His humor was lighter, nervous, always half a beat ahead of something darker. He cracked jokes because if he didn't, the silence would start to win. Reyes could hit a tin can at 50 yards with iron sights and no light, but his hands shook when the weather turned. He'd laugh it off, say it was just the cold. We all pretended to believe him. Weller was our technician, 5th class, the kind of man who treated a radio like a living thing. He kept it clean, tuned, humming. He believed in systems, in order, in the idea that everything could be fixed if you turned the right dial. He wore a little Saint medal on his dog tag chain, never took it off, said it was for weather, not faith. When the wind shifted, he'd knock on wood, check the sky, and tell us how the next storm would roll in. We teased him for it, but we listened too. Then there was Sanders, private first class. The youngest, he still had the look of a boy who thought war was something that happened to other people. He tried too hard, smiled too much, and shined his boots like it mattered. We didn't tease him for that. Not really. You could tell he wanted to belong. The forest has a way of aging men fast. By the end of that first month, Sanders looked 10 years older. And me? I was the quiet one. Owen Lee, farm kid from east of nowhere. I'd been good with wires, so the Signal Corps took me. I didn't mind the quiet. Back home, quiet meant safety. In that forest, it meant something else entirely. Our camp sat on a narrow shelf halfway up Willamette Ridge. The logging road wound below us like a scar through the trees. A single rail spur ran north toward the main supply line, feeding the war like a vein. The whole place smelled of pine and oil and damp canvas. Boots never dried, socks hung by the stove like flags of surrender. The coffee boiled so long it tasted like metal, but we drank it anyway because hot was hot. Mornings came gray and mean. We'd wake before dawn because mornings in that place had no mercy. The air was sharp enough to bite, the kind that made your lungs ache with the first breath. We had 2 stoves, one in the big tent, one in the shack. Both smoked more than they heated. Weller would curse at them like bad radios, banging on the sides until they agreed to burn. Breakfast was always the same: powdered eggs, black coffee, and conversation that barely counted as words. Mac would say something about home. Rez would turn it into a joke. Sanders would laugh too loud. Hale would ignore them all and read the logbook. We lived in a pattern. It kept us sane. Every morning, 2 men checked the wire lines along the ridge. 2 patrolled the trail down toward the creek. 1 stayed with the radio. Hale drifted between us like a ghost, making sure the world hadn't fallen apart while we weren't looking. The job itself wasn't hard. Guard the ridge, watch for movement, keep the signal clear, report anything strange. The hardest part was staying awake in a place that wanted you to sleep, the kind of sleep that never ends. At night, we'd gather in the big tent, lanterns low, and tell stories. Old ones, dumb ones, anything to fill the air. The forest outside was always breathing, the fog pressing against the canvas like it wanted in. Sometimes we'd hear an owl, or what we thought was one. Sometimes branches cracked in ways they shouldn't, but that's forest life. You tell yourself that enough, and it starts to sound true. One night, Hale said something that stuck with me. He was cleaning his rifle by the stove, the barrel glinting dull orange in the light. He said, "Men get soft when it's Sep's quiet. They start hearing things that aren't Sep there." Mac laughed and said, "I Sep rather hear something than think too much." Hale looked up, just once. "Thinking keeps you alive," he said. "Listening keeps you longer." At the time, it sounded like one of his strange bits of wisdom, half warning, half nonsense. But later, when the woods went still for real, I remembered it. We were soldiers, but we were also just men trying to fill the hours. We built our lives around noise, the scrape of boots, the rattle of cans, the hiss of the radio. The noise made the silence bearable, but silence has a weight, and on that ridge, it started pressing down harder every day. You could feel it, even when you laughed. The sense that something out there was listening back. The days blurred. The rain came sideways. The fog crept low and thick, hiding the treetops in the sky. It was easy to forget what direction anything was. One morning, Sanders said it first. "It sets quiet wrong," he said. We laughed, called him green, told him the woods go silent sometimes, that it was just the weather. But we all heard it. That strange, perfect quiet, like the forest had stopped breathing. And if I'd known what was coming, I'd have told him he was right. Because that silence wasn't set empty. It was listening. It started with the silence, not the kind that comes at night when the wind dies or the rain slows. This was different, heavy, hollow, the kind that makes your own breath sound too loud. Sanders was the first to notice it, but none of us wanted to admit he was right. We were soldiers, not children. We didn't believe in ghost stories or campfire talk. But that morning, the forest had changed. It was still black outside when Sanders stepped out of the tent. A few minutes later, he came back pale, his helmet crooked on his head. "Sergeant," he said, "it sits quiet wrong." Hale didn't look up from the ledger he was writing in. "Use your words, Private." "I am," Sanders said. "It sits quiet wrong." Reyes snorted from his cot. "Maybe the woods don't want to hear you take a leak." Mac threw a glove at him. "Ease up." But even Weller, coiling the radio cord by the stove, stopped what he was doing and listened, his head tilted like he was tuning a frequency. Even he went still. For a long moment, nobody said a word. You could hear the stove tick as it cooled, the drip of rain off the tent flap, and nothing else. No birds, no wind, no branches moving, just the emptiness between sounds. Hale finally set down his pencil and looked up. "Noted," he said simply. Then he pointed. "Lee, Mac, you are with me. We still check the lines south. Reyes, Sanders, take the trail east. Weller, swap the battery and give me a fresh weather raid." That was Hale. No panic, no talk, just orders. We stepped out into fog so thick it felt alive. It chewed the world down to 30 yards in any direction. Boots sank into the mud. Water filled our tracks as fast as we made them. The ridge fell away into a creek bed, and the trees leaned in over the trail like men whispering secrets. Everything dripped. Everything smelled of wet pine and metal. We didn't talk much. When we did, it was about nothing. Coffee, letters, anything to keep the silence from crawling too close. We reached the first wire post. The line was intact, running clean along the ridge. I tapped it, felt the current hum faintly. Nothing wrong there. "Could be weather," I said, "mostly to fill the air." "Could be," Hale answered, though he didn't sound convinced. We moved on. Checked the next post. Same, no damage, no breaks. Just fog and that terrible, patient quiet. After an hour, the sun tried to rise but couldn't break the clouds. The fog turned pale instead of black. Birds came back, one or two at first. Then the forest seemed to remember itself. Reyes and Sanders returned a little after we did. Boots caked in mud. "Nothing," Reyes said, shrugging. "Trail steps clear. No prints, no movement, just quiet." "Good," Hale said. "Let's keep it that way." We pretended to believe that was the end of it. Soldiers are good at pretending. That night, the rain came back. We stacked a crate by the big tent flap, rations mostly, some canned meat, coffee, and a few flares. Standard supply. The stove smoked like a dying animal. The tent smelled like wet wool and socks trying to give up. We joked about it because jokes keep fear small. I took second watch with Mac. Midnight, the lantern threw a small ring of light that made everything outside look darker than it was. You learn to ignore the shapes the dark makes, the stumps that look like men, the branches that seem to move when they shouldn't. You learn what's normal in the woods. Then something changed. It was a sound, but not a sound you could name. A low, slow exhale that made your teeth buzz. Heavy, wet, alive. Max Sepp's hand froze on his rifle. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. He shook his head. "Bear, big one, maybe." But even as he said it, we both knew it wasn't set. It wasn't the shuffle of paws or the grunt of something rooting around. It was measured, rhythmic, breathing. Close. Mac flicked on his flashlight and swept it across the tree line. The beam cut through fog and caught nothing but gray. The sound stopped. We waited, counted seconds by the drip of water from the tent flap. Then, as sudden as it came, it was gone. We stood there a long while, listening to our own hearts. "Probably smelled the rations," Mac said finally. "Bear Sid'll eat anything." "You smell like beans," I said. It was supposed to be a joke. It didn't land. We finished our shift in silence. When Weller and Reyes took over, Reyes mentioned hearing something too. "Breathing," he said, almost laughing, like the forest sits got lungs. We laughed back, because that's what men do when they're afraid. By morning, we were almost convinced it hadn't happened. Almost. Then we saw the crate It was still by the tent flap, but splintered apart. The boards were torn outward, nails bent like they'd been pulled, not pried. The canvas tie that held the lid down was gone, ripped clean through. Hell, Hale muttered. He crouched and ran a hand along the splintered edge. What did this? Reyes leaned in. Not a knife, not clean. Look, these edges are chewed. He was right. The wood looked gnawed, broken, like something had pulled it apart with its teeth. The cans inside were gone. A few lay in the mud, dented and crushed, teeth marks pressed deep into the metal. Not teeth like a bear. Too far apart, too deep. We circled the spot like men afraid to get closer but too proud to step back. That's Seps when I saw the print. Half in mud, half in pine needles. Big, deep, human shape, but not right. The heel sank like something heavy had leaned into it. The toes were long, spreading forward, digging in. I put my hand in it. My fingers didn't reach the edges. Weller stood back, arms folded tight. That's wrong, he said softly. Mac glanced at him. Bear, right? His voice cracked. Big one? Reyes tried to make a joke, but couldn't find the words. Hale didn't say anything. He looked once at the trees, then back at us. Perimeter check. Standard formation. Mac, down to the creek. Reyes, Weller upper trail. Sanders, you sip were with me. Move. And that was it. No panic, no theories, just orders. We spent the next hour combing the ridge. No more prints, no claw marks, no scat, nothing. By noon, the forest sounded alive again. Birds, wind, the occasional crack of branches under snow. But that morning never left me. The silence, the prints, the sound that didn't belong. Because once you hear the forest breathe, you start to realize it's been listening the whole time. We wrote it up as animal interference, logged the missing rations, fixed the crate, and kept our rifles clean. But every man in that camp started sleeping lighter after that. The kind of sleep where you wake up to listen, not rest. And deep down, we all knew something had changed on that ridge. Something old, something patient. And it was just getting started. Fear has a sound. It isn't screaming or gunfire. It's the small noises men make when they're pretending not to be afraid. The clearing of a throat, the nervous laugh, the click of a safety checked one too many times. That's what the outpost became after that night. A camp full of small sounds trying to drown out something bigger waiting in the trees. The next few days passed in half silence. No more broken crates, no more footprints. But no one believed it was over. You could feel the forest watching, like the trees leaned closer every time you looked away. We tried to keep the routine. Hale insisted on it. Routine was order and order was safety. Fear sips a hole, he said once. You start digging, you never stop. So we kept digging the other kind, latrine trenches, wire holes, foxholes, anything to keep busy. Reyes kept making jokes, but they came out wrong now. Forced, he laughed too hard at things that weren't funny. Sanders laughed too, but his eyes stayed on the tree line. Weller worked the radio like it was a lifeline. He'd sit hunched over it for hours, tapping dials, chasing signals that faded into static. He said the weather was changing, cold front coming in from the coast. Mac rolled his eyes. That your official forecast, Father Weller? Weller didn't smile. Storms make ghosts louder. We didn't ask what he meant. One evening, Reyes went to check the creek line. He came back with mud up to his knees and a look I didn't like. Nothing moving down there, he said. Not even tracks, like the forest forgot how to walk. No one answered. There was nothing to say. That night, the stones started. It began with 3 sharp thuds against the side of the supply tent. Not wind, not rain. Deliberate. 3, then silence. Reyes muttered, wind, but his voice didn't believe it. The next night, it happened again. 5 stones this time, same rhythm, same silence afterward. Hale ordered us to check the perimeter. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone moving through. The fog swallowed everything beyond the lantern light. We doubled the guard. 2 men awake at all times. No one alone. That held for a few nights until the forest got bold. On the 4th night, the stones came closer. One struck the crate beside the stove and split it clean down the grain. Ray's counted the hits under his breath like a prayer. 3, 5, 7. Then nothing. He tried a joke. We got a fan out there, but it died before it left his mouth. Later that same night, Max swore he saw movement just past the light line, a shadow, tall and hunched. Gone before his flashlight reached it. We said nothing. It's strange how quickly men can adapt to fear. You can live with it, even laugh beside it, as long as it doesn't move too fast. We stopped talking about bears. We didn't talk about the tracks or the breathing. We just stopped talking, period. The next morning we found something hanging in the trees beyond the creek. A deer, or what was left of one. Gutted clean, hoisted 30 feet up like a warning. The flesh open neat but wrong, like claws that knew where to cut. No rope, no drag marks. We stood beneath it, staring up, trying to make sense of it. Weller said softly, "Men do this. Men can be cruel." "Then where are their boots?" Max shot back. No one answered. The wind shifted. The smell was copper and wet bark. We went back to camp slower than we said it'd come. That night, nobody slept much. Every sound became the thing in the fog. The crack of ice in the stove, the pop of a knot in the fire, the sigh of the wind against canvas, it all sounded alive. Reyes stopped joking altogether. He cleaned his rifle 3 times that evening. When I asked if he was all right, he said, "Just keeping it kind," quoting Hale. Then he smiled without humor and added, "Maybe it's still be kind back." The next clear night came like a mistake. The fog thinned, the stars showed through. For the first time in weeks, we could see the ridgeline. We played cards under the lantern, pretending to relax. For an hour we were just men again, cold, tired but alive. When we went to our tents, the quiet felt merciful. Until morning, Hale was walking the trench line when he called out, "This is wrong." We ran to him. Something had dug at the edges of the latrine pit. Not an animal. The marks were too deep, too spaced, like a man's hands. But bigger. It hadn't gone far. Just enough to show it could. Hale didn't curse, didn't speak. He pulled his pencil and made a note in his ledger. Disturbance was all he wrote. We all knew what it meant. It sits getting closer. After that, the prints returned. Not one set, but 2, maybe 3. We found them near the trail, in the mud behind the supply tent, even close to the stove. Always overnight, always deeper. Reyes tried to measure one with his hand. "You could fit a helmet in this," he said softly. Mac muttered, "It's Seps counting us." He was right. The forest wasn't random anymore. It was deliberate. Watching, testing. That's when Hale set new orders. No one outside the camp perimeter at night, patrols only in pairs. Fire only if fired upon. He wanted control, he wanted reason. But reason doesn't survive long in a place like that. One night, Reyes lost his nerve. He hung a can of beans from a string near the fire and sat waiting, rifle across his knees. "Come on, big boy," he said, into the dark. "You like our food, Don set you. Come take your supper." We all pretended to ignore him, but nobody looked away from the tree line. The can swayed once. Just a tremor, like something breathing close by. Reyes went still, then he stood, cut the string, and put the can back himself. He didn't speak again that night. After that, even the forest seemed to hold its breath. The rain came and went. The fog crept low again, thick as smoke. And through it all, the feeling grew that we were being studied, watched, waited for. Hale said it best. One night when the wind carried the smell of rain through the torn canvas flap, "It's such learning us," he said quietly. No one asked what he meant. We already knew. The forest had stopped hiding. Now it was looking right back. Storms on the ridge came fast. You could feel them hours before they broke. The air growing thick. The clouds rolling in low like smoke. The forest went still before a storm. But that kind of stillness had stopped feeling like weather. By then Sanders had stopped sleeping. He'd wake from shallow dozes, rifle half raised, eyes wild. I'd find him sitting outside the tent at dawn, staring into the fog like he expected it to part. He told me once, quiet, it watches us. I told him he was tired. I told him everything was fine. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Neither did I. The stones had stopped. The woods had gone silent again, that same perfect quiet from before. That was worse. Reyes said it best. When it sits loud, it sits far. When it sits quiet, it sits close. The day before it happened, the fog sat so thick you could barely see the tents from the stove. Hale made us clean rifles, run drills, and check the wire. Routine. Always routine. Fear sips the fire, he said. Feed it, and it eats you. He was trying to keep us steady, but you could see it in his face. Even he was feeling it. Weller kept fiddling with the radio, trying to reach the district line. Static, bursts of half words, then nothing. He said the storm front was killing the signal. Maybe he was right. Maybe not. That night, the weather broke. Wind hit like a train. Rain hammered the tents sideways. The fog turned into sheets of water. The canvas flapped so hard it sounded like gunfire. We'd set watch in pairs. Sanders drew first with Reyes. The rest of us huddled inside the main tent, listening to the storm try to tear the world apart. Then, through the noise, a single word, Sergeant. Short, sharp, lost to the wind. Then a crack, not thunder, something closer. We went out fast. Lanterns high, rifles up, rain blinding. Sanders' Sepp's post was empty. The stake line was ripped up, half the rope dangling loose. His rifle lay in the mud a few feet away, strap torn, the barrel bent. The ground told the story. Footprints, deep and desperate, leading away from the camp, and then drag marks. Wide, long, too clean. It looked like he's been pulled. Hale knelt down, his face unreadable. Hold positions, he said. We search in a line, keep sight of each other. We moved into the trees, marking trunks with chalk so we wouldn't lose our way. The fog shredded around our lamps, showing flashes of wet bark, empty space, and then nothing again. The forest was breathing around us. I swear it was. Branches cracked to the left. We turned, the sound was already behind us. Another to the right, heavier, closer. Whatever it wasn't running. It was circling. Weller panicked first. He fired 3 quick bursts into the fog. The muzzle flash lit the rain like silver knives. Hold fire, Hale barked, grabbing his rifle barrel and pushing it down. You'll hit Lee. Better than what's out there, Weller said, his voice breaking. No one answered. We called Sanders' name until the wind threw it back at us. The only reply was a long, slow exhale through the trees. It wasn't the wind. We fell back to the camp, soaked and shaking. Hale set us in a tight wedge. Rifles out. We stood like that for hours, rain pouring, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. When dawn came, it didn't bring light, just less dark. The rain had turned the camp to mud. Sanders' post looked smaller now, like the forest had already begun to take it back. We didn't talk about him. Soldiers don't talk about missing men until they have to. We just went about our tasks, quieter, slower, pretending everything still made sense. That afternoon, Mac cornered Hale by the stove. I couldn't hear it all, but I caught enough. We need to get off this ridge, Mac hissed. Report it, get help, something. Hale didn't raise his voice. He never did. We don't abandon our post because the woods made a noise. It sets not noise, Mac said. Enough? Hale cut him off. We hold position until command says otherwise. He did radio it in later. I watched him. He adjusted the antenna, swapped the battery, smacked the side of the case like men do when they want metal to listen. The signal came in and out. Broken words, interference, then silence. He got enough through to send a report. 1 man missing, possible animal attack. That's what the paper would say later too. The weather turned mean again. Static swallowed the airwaves. We were cut off. That night, Hale doubled the guard. 2 men on watch at all times, lanterns low, rifles ready. Reyes volunteered for first shift. Mac went with him. The rest of us sat by the stove, waiting for a noise. Any noise that wasn't our own breathing. Hours passed. The storm eased to drizzle. The fire hissed in the damp. For a moment, it almost felt safe. Then came the sound. Slow, heavy, dragging, not footsteps exactly, but weight moving between the trees. Maxit's voice from outside, low but urgent, something sets out there. We scrambled for rifles. The lantern light caught a shape moving at the edge of the fog. Broad shoulders, a head that hung too low. Then it was gone. Rays fired into the dark, 3 shots tight and fast. The echoes rolled off the hills. "Hold," Hale shouted. Silence again. Only the sound of rain hitting metal. We waited, listening for movement, breathing hard enough to hear it over the drizzle. Nothing. When the morning came, the only thing we found were more prints. Fresh ones deep, circling the camp. Reyes crouched beside one. His voice shook. It was here watching. Hale didn't argue. He didn't speak at all. He just looked toward the tree line, jaw tight. That was when we stopped being soldiers. We still wore the uniforms, still checked rifles, still followed orders, but something had changed. We weren't set guarding the ridge anymore. The ridge was guarding us. The storm never really ended. It just learned to wait. After Sanders disappeared, the ridge became a wound that wouldn't close. We still went through the motions, cleaned rifles, logged rations, checked the wire, but we weren't soldiers anymore. We were men pretending we still had a purpose. Hale tried to hold it together. He believed order could save us. "Fear breaks discipline," he said one morning, as we huddled around the stove. "And without discipline, you sit already dead." But even he had started to look over his shoulder. The forest grew restless. Every night we'd hear movement, not constant, not random, measured, pacing, watching. Sometimes it sounded like branches cracking, other times like a man stepping careful. And then there was the breathing, that slow, heavy rhythm that came and went just outside the edge of the light. The forest didn't roar or howl, it just exhaled. And that was worse. Reyes said it sounded like a furnace trying to wake up. Weller said it was the wind hitting the ridge wrong. Hale said nothing at all. By the second night after Sanders vanished, none of us slept. Reyes started counting the hours out loud, whispering them as if saying the numbers would keep the dark away. Mac told him to shut up, but he didn't. I think the silence scared him more than anything else. The prints came back, larger this time, pressed deep in the mud just outside the tent line. We followed them until they vanished into the fog, like footsteps walking out of the world. "Bear," Weller muttered. "Has to be." But he didn't sound like he believed it. That afternoon, we found more circling the camp, doubling back, stopping at the cook fire. It had been standing there close enough to see us, close enough to learn our patterns. We set up trip lines, flares, whatever we had left. We stacked crates around the tents, made a wall that wouldn't stop anything bigger than a dog, but it felt better to have something between us and the dark. That night, the forest decided to move. It began just after midnight, a gust of wind strong enough to rattle the stove door, then a sound that didn't belong, canvas tearing, stakes popping free. Hale was already on his feet, shouting, "Lights?" The lanterns came up. The camp exploded into motion. Crates went over. Tents collapsed. Then something hit the side of the supply shack hard enough to make it shudder. It wasn't set a tree falling. It was deliberate. A shape moved just beyond the light, huge and hunched. For a second, lightning split the sky, and in that brief white flash, I saw it. Broad, upright, covered in what looked like matted hair, eyes that caught the light like metal. Then the dark swallowed it again. Rays fired first, short bursts, tight control. The sound cracked through the fog like thunder. Whatever it was moved fast, too fast for its size. The air went heavy with the smell of wet earth and something else, something old and animal. A scream tore through the rain. Rays was gone. One second he was there, standing near the lantern, and the next he was on the ground, being pulled backward into the dark. I lunged, grabbed for his strap. Mac was there too, both of us hauling with everything we had. For a moment we held him. Then the strap went tight, cut into my palm, and snapped. He vanished into the trees like he'd never been there at all. Max shouted his name until his voice broke. Halesep's order cut through the chaos like a blade. Fall back, cabin, now. We didn't argue. The survey cabin sat up against a rock face, a one-room shelter from before the war. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, dropped the bar across it, and shoved a table against the wall. The lantern's flame was low and trembling. For a long while, nothing happened. The rain softened to a hiss. The wind fell quiet. Then the breathing came back. Right outside the door, slow, steady, like the world itself was exhaling. Mac's hands trembled on his rifle. "It's testing us," he whispered. Weller was praying under his breath, fingers gripping his Saint metal so tight I thought it would cut him. I just listened, because that's all you can do when something bigger than fear decides to stand right outside your door. The breathing moved, first to one side then the other, as if it were pacing. You could hear the boards creak beneath its weight. Then silence. Hale didn't blink. His eyes were locked on the door, waiting. He whispered, "Hold your fire until you see it." But it never came through. It didn't have to. Hours passed. The lantern burned low, throwing shadows that looked like movement even when there wasn't any. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, sitting up, because I woke to gray light leaking through the window. The breathing was gone. When we opened the door, the world was still. The camp was gone. Tents flattened, crates broken and scattered. The stove overturned. Everything looked like it had been hit by a storm that only touched our little patch of forest. Drag marks cut through the mud, long and straight, leading into the trees. No footprints beside them, no signs of struggle, just trails ending where the forest swallowed them. We followed one until it disappeared into fog so thick it felt solid. Hale finally stopped walking. He looked back at us, 3 men now, and said, "Pack what matters." That's all. We didn't argue. We gathered what we could carry: rations, ammunition, the radio, the ledger. Everything else we left to the trees. When we turned to leave, I looked once more toward the ridge. The fog moved like breath over the pines. And in that shifting gray, I thought I saw it. Something tall, still, almost human, watching us go. I blinked. It was gone. We started down the trail, each step louder than it should have been. The forest didn't follow. It didn't need to. Because it had already won. Dawn didn't look like dawn that morning. It wasn't golden or bright, it was just gray, less dark than before. A weak light that only showed what was left of us. 3 men soaked through, moving down a mountain that didn't want to let us go. The camp behind us was gone, flattened. We carried what we could. Hale with the radio, Mac with the ammo tin, me with the ledger, and what rations remained. We didn't talk. Talking would have made it real. Every few minutes, one of us would glance back up the ridge. The fog hung over it like smoke from something still burning. Somewhere behind us, deep in the trees, the forest shifted. Not a movement we could see, just a feeling like the ground breathed in and held it. We walked faster. The path wound through thick timber and loose stone. Our boots slipped in the mud, our packs heavy with rain. My hands shook from exhaustion, but I kept the rifle ready. Habit, hope, both useless by then. By mid-morning, the rain had stopped. The forest went quiet again, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the creak of our gear and the sound of breath. We reached the creek by noon. The water ran thick and brown, swollen from the storm. On the other side, the road waited, the old supply line that led back towards civilization. We should have been relieved. But standing there, we all hesitated. It felt wrong to cross, like the forest was letting us go on purpose. Hale turned, looked back up the hill. "Eyes open," he said softly. We weren't set. The sound came faint at first, a low, distant roll that you could mistake for thunder. But it wasn't thunder. It had rhythm. Slow, heavy. A sound that moved. Hale froze. Mac looked at me. Then we heard it again, closer this time. A long, low growl that rose at the end like a voice trying to form a word. It echoed off the trees and rolled down the valley, dragging the fog with it. We didn't wait to see what followed. We crossed the creek fast, water up to our knees, packs dragging us sideways. The mud sucked at our boots like it wanted us to stay. On the far bank, we stumbled up the slope and kept moving. No one spoke until the sound faded behind us. Even then, no one said what we were all thinking. It wasn't chasing us, it was watching us leave. By dusk, the road leveled out. Diesel smell carried through the air. Somewhere ahead, we heard voices, men shouting, a truck engine idling. A patrol found us a mile later, 2 riflemen and a medic. Their uniforms looked impossibly clean. The lead man stared as we came out of the fog. Jesus, he said, what the hell happened to you boys? Hale didn't hesitate. Lost the post, he said simply. They wrapped us in blankets, gave us water, led us to the truck. I remember the metal floor rattling under us, the sound of tires on gravel, the slow rise of warmth from the engine. We didn't speak. The medic kept looking at us like he was counting ghosts. At the depot down the line, they gave us dry clothes, soup, and cots that didn't move. A nurse with kind eyes bandaged the cuts on my hands and asked what happened out there. Bears, I said. Big ones. She smiled like she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. The report came the next morning. The doctor wrote it himself. Exposure, exhaustion, combat fatigue. He added possible animal encounter because the Army needs a name for everything. He said bear twice, wolf once, and mountain lion just to make it sound official. I nodded through all of it. I didn't correct him. I just wanted to go home. Hale didn't make it that far. He caught a fever 2 nights later, delirious, half-conscious, talking to someone who wasn't there. It wasn't a bear, he whispered. Didn't want food. It wanted us gone. Then he stared at the ceiling for a long time, eyes open as if waiting for something to move up there. He stopped talking after that. Mac and I were transferred east to Pendleton. Flat country, open sky, no trees. I liked that. We didn't talk about Oregon. Not out loud. New men joined the unit later and asked what happened at Wampus Ridge. We just said fog'll mess you up. They laughed. We laughed too, but not right. A month later, a new squad went up there to recover the equipment. 6 men and an old corporal who thought he'd seen it all. They came back 2 days late, said the weather turned rough. One of them found me at mess. He sat down, quiet. He said, "That place is wrong." I asked what he meant. He said they found prints, big ones, half full of water, deep as a man's arm. They led toward the ridge and stopped dead at the tree line. He told me one guy put his boot inside one print just to see, said it sank. Like the ground wanted to keep him. Then he looked at me and said, "You ever hear breathing out there?" I told him not to joke like that. He said, "I wasn't joking." He didn't say another word about it, neither did I. The Army closed the outpost a few weeks later. No announcement, no paperwork anyone ever saw, just gone. The rail line stayed, the war went on, the forest stayed too. It always does. Years later, when people ask about the war, I tell them about wires and radios, about cold nights and bad coffee. I don't tell them about the ridge. Not unless the fire's low and the bottle's near empty, because some battlefields never make the papers. And some things never left the woods. Last winter, snow came early where I live now. Flat land, no pines. I went out to check the fence. There was something in the snow by the barn. A print, big, half melted. Too big for a man, too far from any road. I didn't tell anyone. I just shoveled it over. Sometimes, late at night when the wind dies and the world goes still, I stand at the door and listen. Not for birds, not for wind, for breathing. And sometimes I think I still hear it, slow, patient, waiting. Like the forest never forgot me. Like it's still counting.